A long time ago, in Tutukor, a beautiful African village surrounded by the forest, there lived a man named Odokor, who was so lazy that even the dogs in the village seemed busier than him. The villagers joked that if work were good, Odokor would still refuse to pick it up. He spent most of his days lying under the mango tree, chewing any fruit that fell to the ground. Sometimes he would be sleeping on top of the biggest mango tree in that village, while other villagers are working in their farms. One sunny afternoon, Odokor was sleeping under the mango tree when a woman who was returning from the farm yelled at him, "Odokor, get up and do something with your life." "I am doing something," Odokor replied lazily. "I am waiting for the wind to bring me another mango." The villagers who heard what he said burst into laughter. In Tutukor, the villagers always laughed at Odokor's laziness. The villagers often gathered to talk about Odokor. Even the children teased him by calling him Odokor, the sleeping drum, because he was always lying still like a drum that no one played. One day, when the villagers became fed up of Odokor, they decided to take their complaints to the king. "Your Majesty," an elder said with all seriousness, "Odokor's laziness is an insult to our hard-working community. He does nothing but eat, sleep, and snore like a broken gong." The king stroked his beard thoughtfully. "Perhaps we can solve this problem by giving him a responsibility," he said. "Let us make Odokor the town crier." The villagers were surprised. "Odokor, town crier? He can barely carry himself, let alone a gong," said an elder. But the king was determined. He believed that giving Odokor a job might finally awaken some sense of duty in him. The next morning, Odokor was summoned to the palace. He arrived yawning. "Odokor," the king said, his voice echoing in the palace, "your days of laziness are over. From today, you are the town crier of Tutukor." Odokor scratched his beard, looking so confused. "But, your Majesty, what does a town crier do?" he asked. "You will walk through the village morning and evening, beating this gong," the king said, pointing to a shining brass gong, "and announcing important news." "Walking, beating a gong, announcing? That sounds like 3 jobs in one," Odokor said, while trembling. The villagers laughed, but the king silenced them with a wave of his hand. "Do not argue, Odokor. If you fail in this duty, you will be banished from this village." Reluctantly, Odokor agreed. Early the next morning, he stood in the village square, holding the gong with trembling hands. He took a deep breath, struck the gong, and began to speak. "Listen, everyone. The king has decreed that the market will be opened for 3 hours tomorrow." As his voice rang through the air, the villagers stopped in their tracks. His words sounded like music, soft and melodious, yet commanding. Even the birds perched on the trees seemed to pause and listen. By the time Odokor finished his announcement, a crowd had gathered around him. "Odokor, is that really you?" asked Auntie Amma, clutching her chest in surprise. "Your voice is sweeter than palm wine," exclaimed one of the farmers. Odokor smiled, pleased with the attention. "Well, I've always been gifted. You people just didn't notice." From that day, Odokor's voice became the talk of the village. People began to look forward to his announcements, and some even brought stools to sit and listen. Among those pleased with Odokor's voice was Bimpe, the beautiful wife of Agbeje, the strongest warrior in the village. The color of her skin made her look very unique, and her beauty shines like a mirror in the sun. Bimpe always stood by her window, listening as Odokor passed by during his evening rounds. His voice is like the sound of a river flowing over smooth stones, she murmured to herself one night. The next day, Bimpe decided to approach Odokor. She waited until he finished his announcements and stopped him as he walked past her hut. Odokor, she said, her voice very calm. Your voice is truly a gift from the gods. Odokor blinked in surprise. He wasn't used to such compliments, especially from someone as elegant as Bimpe. Thank you, he stammered. That moment, instead of being lazy, he was shy. You must come to my hut tomorrow evening, Bimpe continued. I'll prepare a meal worthy of your voice. Odokor's stomach made some noise at the mention of meal. His weakness for a good meal overpowered any sense of caution. Of course I'll be here, he said. The next day, when Odokor was done announcing, he sneaked into Bimpe's hut under the cover of darkness. As promised, she had prepared him a feast, yam porridge, fried plantains, and a pot of steamy palm nut soup. This is better than anything I've ever eaten, Odokor exclaimed while eating. Bimpe laughed and then said, There's more where that came from, Odokor, but you must visit me every day. Simply because of food, Odokor started visiting Bimpe almost every evening. One moonless night, Odokor tiptoed into Bimpe's hut, his heart beating like a talking drum. He glanced around nervously before slipping into her room, where Bimpe was waiting with a mischievous smile. Odokor, she whispered, pulling him inside. Why do you look like a frightened goat? Because I feel like one, Odokor replied, his voice trembling. Do you know what Agbeje would do to me if he caught me here? I've heard he once wrestled a lion with his bare hands. Bimpe laughed softly. Relax, Odokor. Agbeje is away tonight, drinking with his warriors' friends. No one would disturb us. Odokor sat on the edge of the wooden stool she had placed for him, his knees bouncing nervously. He eyed the door as if expecting it to burst open any moment. Are you sure the door is locked? He asked, wiping sweat from his forehead. Yes, Odokor, Bimpe replied, rolling her eyes. I locked it myself. You are acting as if Agbeje can walk through the walls. Well, with the way people describe him, I wouldn't be surprised, Odokor whispered. That night, Bimpe gave him another delicious meal. Eat and relax. You are very safe with me, said Bimpe. Odokor started eating the moment the food was served. When he finished eating, he said, You know, Bimpe, this sneaking around is giving me gray hairs. If Agbeje finds out, my sweet voice would only be good for a song at a funeral. Bimpe chuckled and sat beside him. You worry too much, Odokor. Besides, no one would believe that lazy Odokor would charm a warrior's wife. Odokor sighed. True, but even a lazy man like me values his life. Suddenly, a loud noise came from outside. Odokor froze, his heart pounding. What was that? He whispered, his eyes wide with fear. Bimpe peeped through the window and smiled. It's just a goat knocking over a calabash. A goat? Odokor's voice cracked. I thought it was Agbeje's footsteps. This food almost became my last supper. Bimpe burst into laughter, but Odokor couldn't shake his nerves. He quickly stood up and said, I think I have overstayed my welcome. I'll see you tomorrow, or maybe next week. I need time to recover from tonight. As he sneaked out into the darkness, Bimpe watched him go, shaking her head in amusement. Odokor, the town crier with the golden voice, afraid of a goat, she murmured to herself. Odokor continued his secret visits to Bimpe's hut for a long time. Though he was always scared of going there, he found himself drawn to her cooking, charm, and laughter. For the lazy Odokor, sneaking into Bimpe's hut required the most effort he had put into anything in his life. But one fateful evening, everything changed. Bimpe met Odokor with a serious expression. "Odokor," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, "I need to tell you something." "What is it?" Odokor asked, already eating a piece of fried plantain she had offered him. "I'm pregnant," she said. Odokor's expression changed, and the plantain he was eating fell from his hand. "Pregnant?" he asked, his voice cracking. "Pregnant with which child?" Bimpe raised an eyebrow. "Whose do you think, Odokor? The wings?" Odokor became very scared and confused. No, this is bad," he said. "This is very bad. Agbeje will kill me. No, he will do worse. He will bury me alive, then dig me up and kill me again." Bimpe tried to calm him down. "Relax, Odokor. We are figuring something out." "Figuring something out?" Odokor's voice rose a little. "The only thing to figure out is how to disappear before Agbeje finds out. I need to leave the village tonight." "Don't be ridiculous," Bimpe said, rolling her eyes. "You can't run away. People will notice, and the rumor will only get louder." Odokor buried his face in his hands. "Why did I let my stomach and my voice get me into this mess? Why on earth was I made the town crier? I should have stayed under my mango tree." Bimpe sat beside him, placing her hand on his shoulder. "Odokor, listen to me," she said. "We'll keep this as a secret. No one will know about it." But Odokor wasn't listening. His mind raced with images of Agbeje chasing him through the village with a spear, the villagers gossiping, and the king banishing him from the village. "Do you think I can disguise myself as a traveling palm wine seller?" he asked. "Or maybe a hunter?" "No, wait. Hunters do too much work." "Odokor," Bimpe said, pulling him out of his irrelevant thoughts. "Agbeje won't suspect anything soon, so stop panicking." Odokor nodded slowly, though his heart was still pounding. "Fine, but if anything goes wrong, I'm running to the next village and never coming back." Bimpe was just smiling while Odokor was expressing his fears. Indeed, she wasn't pregnant. She only wanted to see Odokor's reaction. The night that would change everything began like any other. Odokor was making his rounds, announcing the king's latest decree. As his voice echoed through the quiet streets, Agbeje was out on patrol with his fellow warriors. Suddenly, a scaring roar shattered the night. A lion had entered the village, his glowing eyes and sharp claws striking fear into everyone who saw it. The villagers screamed, locking themselves in their huts. Agbeje and some other warriors grabbed their weapons and ran towards the square where the lion was. Odokor, who had been walking nearby, was so scared. "A lion? Why am I here?" he asked, filled with fear. He got himself hidden behind a tree, and that was when he saw the lion overpowering Agbeje and his fellow warriors. But fate had other plans. As Odokor was trembling, he accidentally struck the gong with his knee. The sound clanged echoing across the square. The lion's ear picked up and it turned towards the sound. The lion began to approach gradually. Odokor tried to run, but because of fear, his legs couldn't move. He was still afraid when his knee struck the gong again. To his greatest surprise, the lion stepped back. That was when Odokor knew there's something about the sound of the gong that seemed scaring to the lion. He struck the gong louder, and the lion started running back into the forest. The louder the sound of the gong, the faster the lion ran away for safety. The villagers peeped out from their huts, watching in awe as Odokor tamed the beast with his gong. The villagers surrounded Odokor, lifting him up onto their shoulders and dancing around the village in a grand style. Odokor, our hero, they chanted. He saved us with his gong. For the first time in his life, Odokor felt like more than just a lazy man. But his joy couldn't last for a long time, for Agbeje's piercing gaze reminded him that his troubles were far from being over. The morning after the lion's attack, the villagers talked about Odokor's bravery. Women sang his praises in the market square. Children followed him around, imitating his voice, and even the king declared, Odokor, you may be lazy, but last night you showed us a different side of you. Odokor smiled, feeling like a king, but his newfound fame came with complications. That night, as Odokor sneaked into Bimpe's hut for what he thought would be another secret meeting, Agbeje saw him from a distance. Agbeje waited long enough to confirm his suspicions before he stepped into action. Inside the room, Odokor was his usual nervous self. Bimpe, he whispered, looking out of the window. Are you sure Agbeje isn't around? I don't want to end up being the lion's food after surviving last night. Relax, Odokor, Bimpe said, laughing softly. Agbeje is probably still out celebrating with his warrior friends. Just as he said that, a shadow appeared at the doorway. The door burst open, and there stood Agbeje, his face like thunder, his massive frame filling the room. Surprise? Agbeje roared, his voice shaking the walls. You think I don't know what's been happening under my nose? Odokor fell to his knees, trembling. Please, Agbeje, I can explain. It wasn't my intention to do it. There's nothing to explain, Agbeje thundered. You dare dishonor me, the strongest warrior in this village. I'm going to end your life right here. Bimpe tried to intervene. Let me explain. Silence! Agbeje yelled, his eyes blazing with fury. You have betrayed me, Bimpe. You and this man. The commotion drew the attention of the villagers, who gathered outside their hut, murmuring in shock. Just when Agbeje wanted to attack Odokor, the door opened and the king walked in. What is going on here? Demanded the king. Agbeje pointed at Odokor and Bimpe. Your Majesty, this man and my wife have betrayed me. They have brought shame upon my household. They must pay for their betrayal. The king looked at Odokor, who was still kneeling on the floor, his face pale. Odokor, the king said, is that true? Odokor nodded, tears streaming down his eyes. Yes, Your Majesty, I am guilty. Please forgive me and spare my life. The king sighed heavily. This is a serious offense. Both of you have disgraced not only Agbeje, but the entire village. You will face the consequences. He turned to the villagers. Let us gather at the village square tomorrow morning. I will pronounce my judgment right there. The next morning, the entire village gathered at the village square. The atmosphere was tense, with whispers and murmurings ripping through the crowd. Odokor and Bimpe stood before the king, their heads bowed in shame. Odokor, for your betrayal and for bringing dishonor to this village, you will be severely punished. You will spend 10 years in isolation at the edge of the forest, working to provide food for the village. If you fail, you will never return. But if you serve the punishment correctly, then you shall return back to the village after the 10th year. Odokor's jaw dropped. Work? For 10 years? Isolation away from a mango tree? Silence, the king commanded. He turned to Bimpe. As for you, Bimpe, you will remain in the village, but your status as Agbeje's wife is revoked. You are to live humbly and serve the community for 10 years to atone for your actions. Agbeje, though still angry, nodded his approval.
This is fair. Let them both learn what it means to face the consequences of their choices. The villagers murmured their agreement, and the meeting was dismissed. Banished to the edge of the forest, Odokor struggled to adapt to his new life. For the first time, he had to fend for himself, gathering firewood, hunting small animals, and planting crops. His once smooth hands became rough, and his laziness slowly faded as he realized the value of hard work. Meanwhile, Bimpe humbled herself, working in the market and helping villagers in need. Though many were still angry with her, she gradually earned back their respect with her humility. 10 years later, Odokor returned to the village, transformed. He was leaner, stronger, and more disciplined. Though some villagers were skeptical, the king allowed him to resume his role as a town crier, but under strict conditions. Agbeje never forgave him completely, but only decided to let it go. Let this be a lesson to all, Agbeje said. Actions have consequences, and no one is above the law of a village. The story of Odokor and Bimpe spread far and wide, becoming a tale of caution for all who heard it. The king gathered the villagers one last time to share the lessons from the story. Let this remind us, the king said, standing tall before the crowd, that no matter how sweet a voice or how charming a person may be, dishonesty and betrayal will always bring shame and punishment. He paused, scanning the faces of the villagers before he continued. Odokor was lazy, but his actions were even worse than his lack of effort. He learned the hard way that life requires responsibility and discipline. Bimpe too betrayed the trust of her husband and her community, but she had paid the price to regain her honor. Turning to Odokor, the king continued, "You have shown that even the laziest among us can change when faced with the consequence of their actions. But let your story be a warning. Laziness and deceit are path to destruction." Finally, the king addressed the entire village. The gods have spared us from greater disasters, but they have also taught us important lessons. Be faithful in your relationship. Respect the trust others placed in you. And remember that every action, good or bad, has consequences. Odokor, now a reformed man, stood before the villagers and said in a very humble tone, "I may not be a warrior or a great man, but I have learned that hard work and honesty are the true measures of a person's worth. I urge you all to value these virtues and avoid the mistakes I made." Bimpe also spoke, her voice filled with remorse. "I have wronged my family and my community, but I will spend the rest of my life proving that even the worst choices can lead to redemption if we are willing to change." The king nodded in approval, then dismissed the gathering. From that day on, Odokor worked diligently as a town crier, earning the respect of the villagers. Though Agbeje never fully forgave him, he tolerated Odokor's presence, satisfied that justice had been served. As for Bimpe, she found peace in her new life, helping others and teaching young girls the value of integrity and faithfulness in marriage. For more interesting story, kindly subscribe to this channel. Please like, share and comment on our videos.